Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We got a special guest on the line today. Who do we have the pleasure of speaking with today?
Retired Officer D.C. Jones.
That's right, Jones. What year did you join the corrections?
Joined corrections in '85.
1985. Why don't you go ahead and tell me the beginning for you?
The beginning, prior to '85, I spent 2 years in juvenile hall at a place called Los Padrinos in Downey. So I graduated from there, sort of say, and went to the department. Started working at Tehachapi. Opened up the first SHU units prior to Pelican Bay.
Let me ask you something real quick. That's a good subject. So SHU units, and you opened them up. What was the word from the higher ups that you were getting? Hey, we're opening up these units. They're for the worst of the worst. What was being told to you guys?
We were getting the worst of the worst. At that time, which probably is still being used, the worst, where we're getting all the problem childs from all the institutions.
Yeah, they usually refer to that as flushing the toilet, correct?
Yeah, correct. So we had everybody when the units first opened up. Soledad, Quentin, DVI, everybody, just their problem children. We got them.
Now, when you refer to problem child, because I worked at Donovan, those problem children are a little different. They're literally problem children. You're talking more of the heavies, Mexican mafia members and members like that, correct?
Exactly, exactly.
So,
Joe Morgan's, people like that.
so how was it? How was setting it up, and how were the first the bodies getting off the bus?
The first load that we had was rocking and rolling and went on from there. When we first got the first load off the bus, we had a stabbing that first night
In the unit?
in the unit.
Was that expected, or that
It was sort of expected because with the clientele that we were getting, it was noted. It came down the line. Hey, you guys watch out because this is what you're getting. Anything could pop out at any time, and exactly starting from the day one. You had days where you might have had a week straight of stuff just popping, popping.
and you were a new cop during this time frame?
Yeah, it was a new cop, coming in. I had a little experience due to my fact that I came out of juvenile hall,
Right.
so I had a setting, but you had a lot of brand new cops. We had the let me backtrack a little bit. What we had the fortune of was a lot of old timers that came down also to train us.
Nice. That's
So
always helpful.
yeah, we had a lot of guys from Quentin, Folsom, Soledad came down to train us, and that was some of the best training that I got was over there at Tehachapi. You had guys that worked the ADSEG and the holes at the other institutions, so they came down and brought their experience. And at that time, it was just closing up in the early '80s, the late '70s. In Quentin, they had a place called Adjustment Center. And that's where the officers, you took the guys that were unruly. And back in the day, you had hands put on you.
Right.
And that's what they did. And that's all officers did. They worked out, went to the gym, worked out, and worked in the adjustment center and did their thing and then went home.
Everybody was swole.
Everybody was swole.
Yeah, man. I seen the pictures and I heard the stories, man. I couldn't imagine that. Everybody walking around like that.
You know what? It took some getting used to for a lot of guys because back then in the day, you had iron on the yard.
Right.
So, you had cats back in the day, 400, 500, 600-pound club on the yard, and that's what they used to do all day. You didn't have to program. Dudes would be out on the yard. And at Tehachapi, it's up in the mountains. So yard, sometimes you'd be out in the snow, it'd be cats working out in the snow. If you was an officer that was working on the yard, guess what? You was out there in the snow watching them dudes work out.
Right. Right. Yeah, I heard it gets cold and I heard it gets hot up there.
It gets cold, it gets hot. It wasn't unusual every once in a while for a bear to come down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Man.
You had a couple of spots if you were a new officer, and some of the guys that were there back at the time, there was places called Spot A and Spot B. and they were on the A and B yards, but they were on the other side of the parking lot. And that was a little shack, literally a little shack that overlooked the parking lot. And that's where you were. You had like a space heater, and you were out there in the elements for your shift.
Man, were these SHU inmates, were they still making a name for themselves? Were they just maintaining their name, or was it just normal business with them?
It was a little of both, because you had see what was crazy at that time. You had your SHU inmates that had been doing their thing, and this is the time that crack was popping off. So this was the time that you had a lot of guys coming in with a lot of time, 18-year-old dudes coming in with 25, 30 years.
Right.
So they trying to establish themselves, where you got the old dudes that's trying to keep their hold on things. So it was a whole different mix during that time in the units.
Now, were youngsters hitting the SHUs?
You had a few, but it mostly was old timers.
Right.
Depending on what the youngsters did, we had a lot of B numbers and C numbers.
Oh man.
So that's how it was going. So you're talking about guys that had been down, 15, 20 years already.
Man, I got so many questions I gotta ask you, man. I'm like bursting at the seams, but I gotta pace myself. And for the viewers out there, we had a phone call earlier, and we were talking about the youngsters coming into the department. What this man is doing on the phone, he's sharing that knowledge, that wisdom, the stuff that's lacking of today. The OGs pulling these youngsters under their arm and schooling them. And like you said, man, you got schooled by the people that came from San Quentin and everywhere else.
Yep, you got schooled, and my theory or my thing is what helped me get around. As an officer, you got to learn how to talk to people.
Definitely.
You got to learn how to talk. You got to learn how to negotiate. You got to learn how to bullshit, and you got to put that all together.
How much would you say respect plays a matter in corrections?
100%.
Exactly, man.
100%. What the main thing, a lot of officers got in trouble, and by say trouble, got in situations that somebody else had to get them out, was lack of respect.
Right.
My thing was, you know what, if a guy was going off, and they was going off towards me, my way to shut him down was, hey, partner, I didn't put you in here. Your actions put you in here. I'm here to do a job.
Yeah, everybody has their own style. Correct.
Yeah. So what works for Johnson or Lopez or Gomez, it's not going to work for me. You have to develop your own style to deal with the inmates.
Right.
And that takes time.
For sure. Time, trial, and error, man. But yeah.
Exactly.
When you were working those SHU units, I assume you were on the ground, you were doing the escorts, you were, was there any particular incident that stands out to you?
You know what? We had one incident, and it was crazy because it really was, they were already, the SHU, you're on lockdown. So we had an inmate that was on suicide watch. We had a new staff come in, and Fresh Fish, she had only been, this was her second day on the job. So we told her and gave her instructions, hey, we're going through the Sally Port. You got this guy on suicide watch. He's not to have anything, nothing. He's in a bear cell, in his shorts, and wife beater, and that's it. He talked her into getting him some hot water. This dude took the hot water, shoved his penis in the hot water, and burned it almost off.
Wow.
If you ever seen a boiled hot dog where you cook it, or a link
in the microwave,
and the casing boils off of it.
Yeah.
That's exactly how his penis looked.
Oh, man, dude. And then back then, what did you guys refer to those guys as? J-Cats?
No.
Or even before then?
Before J-Cats, they were called 5150s.
Oh, man. See, that's news to me right there.
Yeah, you would have a marking. You would go down, you look in the C file, and they'd have the marking, or in your cards, your index cards that you had in the dorm, you'd have it marked in red, and that would let you know that it was a 5150. Because you only had, back back then, they didn't separate him. Everybody came in together, so you didn't know. You didn't have the JCAP and that stuff back then. You found out by word of mouth and down the pipeline, hey, this is 5150. You looked at the paperwork, and then, that's what you had to deal with.
How about sex offenders back there? You mentioned that they weren't separated at that time.
Some of them they tried to separate them. My training started over at Folsom. And let me tell you, back in the day, the AB declared war on the sex offenders. And
automatic.
Automatic. And this is when I was starting over at doing my training at Folsom. Man, the first week that we was there was righteous stickings. They wasn't fooling around. It wasn't no peck. It was slices and, throats opening up and all kinds of stuff. So that's how I broke into the department.
Bone crushers.
Bone crushers.
Right.
So they was getting down.
Man, and dude.
That's, how I broke in the department. Everybody that came in at my time in 85, it was on and popping back then in the mid-80s.
I've heard the war stories, man. But this right here, this is a valuable insight getting it from you. From actually somebody that was in the trenches right there.
Back in the day, it was crazy because the inmates had metal trays.
Damn.
You didn't have that plastic stuff.
Right.
So if you was working in the chow hall, you was really didn't want nothing to pop off. Of course, there was weapons in there, knives and stuff like that. But, if you was line staff, one of them trays come flying around, that's a nasty cut coming on you.
Right. You mentioned chow halls, and I automatically assumed staff assaults because that, to me, was the chow halls were the most deadly, most dangerous places to work at for me.
You know what? The chow halls, because of the movements, but also in the chow halls, if something popped off at this time, this was, you were first getting started with the level 4 and the quads and the all cement buildings. So everything was cement inside. So there were no warning shots. If something popped off in the kitchen and the guards were up, the officers were up watching you, and they had to shoot down in there to make a shot. They had to shoot someone because if you shot on that floor, them 223s would skip all around. They ricochet.
Right.
So that was a part you had to be concerned about. A lot of stuff didn't really pop off in the SHU units because it was controlled. You did have stuff pop off, but a lot of stuff up there at Tehachapi was on level 4 yards, A and B, once you got on the
how were those yards?
Those yards were pretty much cracking because you had weights back there. So you had a lot of stuff, dudes getting their heads caved in and stuff with the weights, them dumbbells and stuff. It got kind of crazy. You just had to watch your back. We had, I was involved myself in 3 riots up there, full scales, like on a level 3 yard went off a couple of times. The level 4 yard went off, and I was on the response teams, so back at that time, and you guys didn't have them. They don't have them any longer, but we had PR-24s.
Right.
And it was aluminum. Later it went to a polyurethane. So all you had your cuffs, your PR-24s, and that was it.
You said you were on a response team. What did that consist of?
You know what? When you had a certain group of officers, and they respond to the riot situations. It might have been 30 or 40, plus you had your other staff that was on the yard taking care. So what we'd have, you'd come in, you had your PR-24s and all that stuff, and you would have, at that time, they just started coming out with vests. So a vest wasn't lightweight to like the stuff that you guys were privy to. Right now, your armor probably weighed about 7 pounds at that time.
Wow.
So you would put that on. You had a helmet, a shield, and we set out in a school bus, a bus that they have, and we would be outside the yard. If something was going to go down, then they would have us wait. And they were like, you know what, you guys, if this starts kicking off, of course you had the alarm go off, and then we would go in the yard to try to take over. And so what we were told to do we were about maybe 2 or 4 feet apart, and you were told to go in the yard and take the yard back. So your instructions were to do a double power swing and forward, double power swing and forward. And anybody that was in front of you, they just got, they got the shit knocked out of them with that PR-24.
Right.
But at that same instant, you had to be aware, too, you had the tower officers that was popping shots off. So, you doing what you got to do, and you got grass flying up around you, and stuff just ping, ping, ping. So, it's kind of crazy.
It's like a war zone, man.
Yeah.
It is a war zone.
It is a war zone. Riots, full-scale riots, that's what it is.
Correct. Yeah, I've been in a couple myself when I was newer. The members on that team, were they handpicked?
Most of them were, yeah.
I kind of figured, just the way that you talk and the way that you carry yourself, I can tell that you were with the business. And just like anything else, man, we know who we want by our sides when shit kicks off.
Right. A lot of guys, being that stuff was popping off every day, you had a lot of dudes that took pride in working out. You had to, because you had to be about it when stuff went down. You didn't have time. Stuff would pop off, and the guys that were in those units and that was in that particular situation, they were, no questions asked, they were down. It was about it.
Yeah, man, that even gives me a sigh of relief right now, just knowing. And I'm sure you can agree when you show up to work and you see certain individuals, you're like, okay, no matter what happens, we're going to be all right for the most part.
Exactly. I'll give you an instance of after I got out of there, I transferred and went down to CRC, to the drug rehab.
Okay.
And I get in my unit. I have a new staff come in. We're doing the paperwork, and I look up, there's 2 dudes going at it in the TV room, just going at it. I'm like, oh, man, let me get out. So I get out of here, run out, break them up. I'm thinking new staff is behind me, backing me up. Dude done locked the door and locked himself in the office and left me in there by myself.
Woo, man.
Oh. So that was a wrap for him, because I got on the phone and called the lieutenant. I said, you got to get this dude out of here. He's no good.
Right.
He's no good.
Man, I'm going to take this right now in sequence. All right, with that being said, you had mentioned to me a good old phrase that I hadn't heard in a while, parking lot therapy. Can you elaborate on that?
Parking lot therapy back in the day was if you and your partner had a problem, or anybody in your units you had a problem with, you handle it after the shift. And we were remote in the fact up there in Tehachapi, there was certain areas that were dark in the parking lots, and after shift, dudes would get up and literally you park your pickup truck or your car or whatever, maybe make a little circle, and the 2 dudes, or if it was 2 female staff, you handle your business. Afterwards, you shook your hand, and you did what you had to do the next day.
Dude, that sounds like music to my ears, man. Only because I know how much stuff like that is needed to quell ongoing drama and unnecessary stuff.
Stops a lot. You didn't have anybody else, and it was combatants stayed there, and everybody, okay, you know what, you need to work on your uppercuts, you need to do this and that. You know how we do it and clown each other.
Right. Yeah, it's all in good fun.
Yeah, that was it. Back in the day, you didn't have much up in Tehachapi. You had one store, you had a bowling alley that had 12 lanes, and that was about it up in Tehachapi. Man. A lot of guys drove down to Bakersfield and lived.
Cool.
And that's about an hour drive.
Man, anything else at Tehachapi that stands out to you that kind of either blew you away or just, had an effect on you?
What had an effect on me was the training that we got, because it was just a solid core of officers up there. The old school dudes took care of you, and they let you learn. They took care of you, but they also let you make mistakes and learn, because when you came in there, you might have had a day each shift. You worked night shift, you worked morning shift, and you worked afternoon shift. And then after that, on your 4th or 5th day, they gave you a dorm. So all you had to do then was look at your post orders, and run that dorm, you had to handle your business.
I forgot about that, man. You guys didn't have post and bid at that time.
It was starting, and but you know what? When you don't have no time, you don't have no post and bid.
Well, I hate to break it to you, man, but these new guys come in, walk right up to the sergeant and lieutenant and say, I need that Monday through Friday, 8 till 4. This isn't going to work out. all this third watch and first watch is for the birds, Sarge.
It took me 5 years before I started getting holidays off.
I'll tell you what, man, I just resigned with 16 years as a lieutenant. I never got to see Saturdays and Sundays off, man.
Sundays and Mondays when I got out of there, we were fully. It was a lot different than your time and how it was calculated because in 5 years back in the day, we were fully vested.
Right.
And now it's just crazy the time that you got to do. I have a friend that's in there now, and he tells me how the calculation is. I'm like, that's nuts.
Oh, yeah, they got to go up to 57.
Yeah, back then they were giving us the golden handshake, which if you were a 50 and did 20, you could get out.
Right. Did you go to CRC right after Tehachapi, or did you touch down at any other pins?
I touched down at Tehachapi first, opened up the SHU units, did 2 years there, then I did 13 more years down at CRC.
Towards the end of your 2 years at Tehachapi in the SHU, did you feel like you were a seasoned vet in the SHU units?
Yeah. Because they were bringing new staff in, and at that time, you were training the new staff at 2 years.
Was there, how about like gang activity as far as kites going out, dope coming in? Do you have experience with that?
I have experience. I worked in the units, and you had kites, man. You'd have guys, and you do your squats, drop little cop squats. Spread your cheeks, you see kites, and you're like, hey, man, you know what? At that time, you would bring them down and put them in a cage. And you put the inmates in the cage and have them do that. Because as soon as you came down, everything was controlled.
Right.
When you came down, you cuffed them up, you came down the stairs, and you put them in the cage, and you had them do the thing, hey, squat, bend over, run your mouth. And a couple of guys, you see kites, and hey, man, I don't have nothing. Okay, then you're going to sit in here naked until you decide that you want to do what you... And up there in the mountains, it's cold. It usually doesn't take that long.
Right.
And then you got your information. Or it was some instances where if the yard was popping off, you might get a little attaboy from somebody. Might come to us and say, hey, you know what, officer, you might not want to come into work tomorrow.
Okay, yeah.
The yard might be a little hot.
Yeah, that still goes on. Not as much, but yeah, if you got a good rapport, definitely get a heads up.
Yep. So like I said, the training, you had so much stuff popping off that in 2 years you had maybe something that someone that worked in the lower institutions never got a chance to experience.
Yeah, there's certain institutions that are prevalent and notorious for violence. Tehachapi, CCI is definitely one of them on the list.
Yep, you get there, Folsom, DVI. Back in the days, those were it. They're on and popping.
Gladiator school.
Gladiators.
Right.
And you had, it was the transition period too from YTS to coming in. So guys was trying to make their name. They sent a lot of youngsters to DVI. But you got a lot of youngsters up at Tehachapi too.
For sure.
When we opened up the level 4 yard, it was pretty cool because we were pretty tight. Up against the wall, and it's walking against the wall, and it was pretty respectful. No cat calling to female staff. We didn't play that up there.
Yeah, that's kind of gone by the wayside, but I hear you, man. That used to drive me nuts, the cat calling.
Yep, that, and they, you had to be strict. And you had to handle your business in order not to get hurt. Because when you're working with SHU units and level 4 inmates, that's about it. For yourself, things pop off quick and they get nasty fast.
Fast, like a fire spreading.
like a fire spreading.
N-
Exactly.
Now, I know jumping in and getting hands on in the mix is fun. I know that that's fun, but what is your take on the way that the department ended up going as far as alarm response and more safer manner? What's your take on that?
To me, that makes it more dangerous to the officer. That's
What?
my.
Why is that?
When you had your hands on, or you were allowed to do a little more, that kind of set precedent for you as an officer not to get tried so much.
Right. Yeah.
Because inmates know who to mess with and who not to.
Boom. You just said it right there. I said that all the time, man.
That dude right there is about it. You can do it if you want to, but
It's not going to end well.
It's not going to end well for you. And back in the day, and I don't know, I've been out, like I said, retired for several years, but a lot of stuff was quelled too by MAC reps.
Right.
And you tell your MAC rep, hey, you know what? You need to talk to your people because this ain't gonna fly. It's gonna come down on everybody.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can agree, man. The inmates don't want their program messed up, effed off.
No, and the stuff I've seen officers doing, the stuff that I did myself, I used to tell the cats, hey, I'm here for 8 or 16 hours. You guys got to live here. So this is how it's going to go down. Don't make my job hard.
Right.
The pen is mightier than the sword.
Yeah.
You can do what you want to do. You might hit me in the jaw. I might fall down. But see that dude up there in the tower right there? When you hit me, you're going to get some lead in your ass.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is. That's kind of how it was. Yeah, they will get theirs for sure, but they're not ultimately gonna win.
No, and it's not about me trying to. I didn't try to punk anybody or do anything like that. I just come in there and do my 8.
Right.
Like, hey man, again, your consequences cause you to be here, and then you have to be smart enough to know that everybody's you're a man. Just because you committed this crime and did this and stuff, you still have to be treated with respect. A lot of people forgot that.
Correct.
You can't talk to an inmate like you would talk to somebody out on the street.
If anything, you have to talk to them more cautiously.
Exactly. Because you have dudes come off, and then you got to realize you might have. I'll do this particular incident that I had. I had a guy. Pretty quiet guy, and I'm doing dorms search or whatever. This dude goes off. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? Blah 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 blah. This, this and this and this. Okay, I let it go. Because I'm like, it's out of character for this cat right here. So the next day he came up and he's like, hey man, I appreciate you not going off on me because I got a Dear John letter.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, that happens in there too. So you have to be aware of that kind of stuff before you be jumping to conclusions. If a dude is having a bad day and going off and stuff, you're like, okay, what's going on? Because 9 times out of 10, if they're a righteous person, they will come back and tell you, hey man, I just had a bad day, man. My old lady left me, or somebody in the family died, or that stuff happens.
Right. I remember being a new cop in the level 4 building, and the counselor told me, hey, let this inmate know that his brother was just shot to death on the streets. And if he needs to make a phone call, he can. But I remember, like, damn. But that was an OG inmate, man. He just stayed quiet. Man, he just acknowledged and then and didn't. That was it.
Some do and some don't. Everybody's different. But that's the one thing about working in corrections. You got 1,000 different personalities that you got to deal with.
Volatile personalities.
Exactly.
Real quick, what was the relationship with like managers, as far as managers at the top of the chain of command down to the troops at the bottom? Did you ever even see them or know them?
At Tehachapi, it was pretty tight. It was. Now, once I got to the other institution, it wasn't about that. It was about telling.
Oh, man. Can you tell me like the time frame if you remember?
That was around 80, probably about 89.
Damn, they were telling back in 89?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hell no, man.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and I know that you can agree that that makes the job challenging, man.
Oh yeah. Oftentimes, and officers, seasoned officers know it's not the inmates that you got to deal with; it's staff that you got to deal with. That's the problem when you come in there. And staff, I mean administration,
Right.
because they're trying to do what they're trying to do. Once you get in and you've been in the department, what I found out, and you're a senior officer, and especially toward the end of my career, they were trying to get the senior officers. It was about that money thing. You had the new guys that was coming in that was making less money, so they was trying to get the old cats out of there.
Correct.
Just to straight up about it.
Yeah, that's still going on.
You have to be careful. And my advice to anybody that's coming in now or has been in a couple of years, be careful what kind of car you want to jump in. My advice is not to get in a car at all, because cars have flats.
Yeah, you
And
told
flats
you
leave you stranded.
you told me that, man. Elaborate more on that. How many times did you see people thought they were riding high and then they were left stranded?
Numerous times, too many to elaborate on. Up to a situation where it was an officer, and she slept her way to the top. She ended up getting lieutenant, and she only had like 5 years in. That's not enough time for you to be a lieutenant. You ain't been through enough stuff. You haven't experienced enough stuff to be trying to lead people, and she didn't get any respect. She got her pay and she jumped up, but that's not the way to do it. And she burned her bridges all the way up. So she didn't have any backup when stuff came. Officers, people are turning their head. And, when I was in the bathroom. Nope, didn't see it. Didn't hear it. So you got to be careful, because the person that you might try to burn might end up being a warden. I've seen that happen too.
Oh yeah, for sure. They hold grudges.
They hold grudges. So you have to be careful. And my thing I was there. I was friendly with my other staff, but I had acquaintances and few friends, if you know what I'm talking about.
I hear you, man. Yeah, I hear you.
Keep your circle small.
Real small.
Real small. It's less riffraff, because you don't need that. You got the pressure coming in, and then you got the pressure with idiots, and then you got the pressure above you with subordinates, and it's not a very nice situation.
Nah, man. It's enough to drive a sane man crazy.
Exactly.
Man, anything else that I didn't cover on that you would like to elaborate or touch on?
Just my main thing was just you have to use your head. You can't go in and try to muscle, because muscle is only going to work for so long. You have to it's a thinking man's, more now it is, it's a thinking man's game where you have to think and talk. Like I said, back in the day, you could do a lot more hands-on. You didn't have cameras around or anything like that. And I wouldn't tell anybody to do this at all. It'll get you fired.
Right.
But back in the day, you handle your business. You would go in the bathroom, you would take your shirt off, take your badge, your backup would hold it, and you would do your thing.
Right.
And it wasn't that if you got your ass whooped, you got whooped. If you didn't, you didn't hold no grudge on who you went against. It was just business.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
And that's how it was done. So any older staff, 80s or below, and really below in the 70s, they was really getting down. So.
Oh, wow.
You had to do what you had to do to get your respect.
Yeah, like you mentioned, you got to use your head, because, like, if you're a young cop and you want to prove yourself and you're looking for a fight, you're gonna find a fight, and it's not gonna end well.
Not gonna end well for you. Not gonna end well at all. And it's unnecessary when you think about it. You don't have to put yourself in those situations. Most guys, and I'll give you another example. We had a guy that used to like to pick on littler inmates. He was probably about 6'4", 6'5". So back in the day, they had, guys were sagging. A lot of sagging going on the hallways. But, hey, man, most of the time I tell you, dude, pull your pants up. Pull them up. You know what's and the guys would comply. But this guy had a bad habit of throwing you on the wall and just ripping your pants down, to your ankles. And this happened a couple of times, and I just got, fed up with that stuff because it was endangering me too.
Right.
I got to back this fool up, what he's doing. So he did it one day, and I told him, I said, hey, you know what? Pulled him over to the side. I said, here comes this big youngster right here. I'll go throw him on the wall and do what you just did. That stopped all that right there.
Yeah.
He never did that again.
You called him on his shit, and that's what you got to do.
Sometimes that's what you got to do.
Man, dude, that's nuts. That's well, I appreciate all that gold, man, knowledge, wisdom that you have dropped on all of us, man.
I appreciate your channel and what you're doing. It's a lot of hands are tied while you're in the department because you got to make that money. You got your family to support and all that, so you can't speak about it. But with you being out the department, myself being out the department, you're free. It's a free for all, so you can tell the real, what goes on. And it's a lot of stuff that officers go through. A lot of stuff that you see that the outside world doesn't see. And a perfect example I'll go to when I worked in juvenile hall and when I worked visiting, I go, the hardest thing I would watch, and in corrections too, was to see a dad trying to be proud and a mom trying to be proud, and son comes in or daughter comes. After they leave, the inmate, they're not seeing what mom and dad going through, where dad is crying and he's trying to be a man and mom done broke down. So that's something to think about too when you're doing your thing.
Yeah, all the people you hurt in the wake of your chaos.
In the wake of your chaos. You going back to your cell, but your mom and daddy got a 2 or 3 hour drive and they done broke down, and he's trying to look at you in the face, Pops is, and be a man, and you're like, it's a nasty situation.
Yeah, that's something too that I learned throughout the years of corrections, working visiting. I automatically assume, like, hey, why would anybody want to visit these inmates? And then you learn and you realize, man, these people are good people and they just want to come and see their loved ones.
They want to see their loved ones.
Right.
Daughters, so it's an eye-opener working in the department. It makes you think a lot differently because you get to see a lot of angles, both good and bad.
Right.
But it's a hell of a ride. I'll put it that way. It's a hell of a ride. No days the same.
Hell yeah, man. That's what keeps it interesting. All right, I'm gonna close out on the video, but go ahead and stay on the line, man.
Okay.
There you have it, folks. Some wisdom and knowledge dropped on you from an OG. If you're new to the department, save this video, message it to yourself, and hear it over and over again. It's going to keep you out of a wreck and more than likely keep you alive.